Blackwood County had weathered storms before, but not like this one. On the evening of October 17th, Shadow Creek swelled beyond its banks with a roar that shook the mountains. Phone lines went dead. Roads vanished under churning brown water. And in a lonely cabin near the riverbank, a mother bobcat huddled over her 3 newborn cubs as the floodwaters crashed through the door. By dawn, only one cub remained alive, clinging to a splintered wooden beam, his tiny claws digging into the wood as the current tried to claim him. This was Coda, though he didn't have a name yet, just the instinct to survive. 2 miles downstream, the flood deposited something else in the mud. A child's yellow plush fish, one glass eye reflecting the pale morning sun. Their stories were about to collide. When rescue teams finally reached Shadow Creek Valley, they found a landscape erased. Houses had been reduced to toothpick piles. Cars lay upside down in trees. And in the eerie silence between calls for survivors, Hank Dawson, a 68-year-old retired logger with a bad hip, heard it. A sound so faint it could have been the wind, the whimper of a dying animal. Following the noise, he nearly stepped on the tiny bobcat cub lying motionless in a nest of broken branches. The creature was barely breathing, his golden eyes clouded with shock. Hank's calloused hands, which had felled 100-year-old oaks, trembled as he lifted the orphaned cub. "Ain't nothin' but bones and fight left in you," he muttered. He didn't yet know that this cat, and the shred of blue flannel tangled in his claws, would unravel Blackwood's oldest mystery. Logan Pierce, a 24-year-old volunteer firefighter, thought Hank was seeing things. "Probably just a rat," he said, shining his flashlight over the wreckage. Then the beam caught it, a tiny paw, twitching weakly beneath a collapsed roof. Logan dropped to his knees, tearing at the debris until his gloves split. What emerged wasn't just an animal. It was a living wound. Coda's ribs pressed against his skin like piano keys. His fur reeked of rot and river sludge. But what chilled Logan to the core was the cub's grip. Even half dead, Coda clung to that scrap of blue fabric like it was the last solid thing on Earth. Later, at Cascade Wildlife Rescue, Dr. Evelyn Carter would identify the cloth. A child's pajama sleeve, size 6 to 8. The same size worn by Danny Whitaker the night he disappeared 20 years ago. The Wildlife Center's quarantine room was too bright, too loud. Everything Coda's wild instincts told him to fear. He thrashed against the towel-lined crate, hissing at every shadow. Dr. Evelyn Carter, a woman whose steel-gray hair and no-nonsense demeanor hid a well of grief, watched his struggle. She'd seen hundreds of traumatized animals, but this cub was different. His pupils stayed dilated even in light. His heartbeat refused to steady. "Shock's gonna kill him before infection does," she told Hank, preparing a sedative. But when she reached into the crate, Coda did the unexpected. He lunged, not to bite, but to press his face into her sleeve, sniffing frantically. Evelyn froze. He wasn't just scared. He was searching. For what? She wouldn't understand until she found the donation box later that night, and the one-eyed plush fish sitting atop it, its golden stitching gleaming under the fluorescence. By midnight, Coda's breathing turned ragged. Evelyn's flashlight revealed the truth. A festering gash hidden beneath his left shoulder, the fur around it matted with pus. "Damn," she whispered. Sepsis had already set in. As she flushed the wound, Coda's weak growls dissolved into something worse, silent shudders. She'd seen wild cats choose death before, shutting down when captivity broke their spirit. But just as she reached for the euthanasia solution, a thud came from the crate. Coda had dragged himself upright, his fever-bright eyes locked on the shelf where she'd placed the yellow fish. His claws scraped the plastic wall, reach, fall, reach again. Evelyn hesitated. Then, against every medical protocol, she dropped the syringe and grabbed the toy. "This what you want, tough guy?" The moment the fish touched the crate floor, Coda collapsed onto it, his entire body going limp, his final conscious act, tucking the toy beneath his chin like a child with a security blanket. Hank found Evelyn at dawn, asleep at the clinic table, her hands still resting on Coda's crate. The cub slept too, his paws wrapped tight around the fish, his breathing finally even. "He make it," Hank rasped. Evelyn nodded toward the x-rays. Fractured ribs, a bruised lung, and a belly full of mud. "He shouldn't have." Hank studied the cub, then the newspaper beside him, a yellowed Blackwood Gazette from 2003. The headline read, "Search suspended for missing boy 9." The accompanying photo showed a freckle-faced kid grinning on a swing set, a yellow fish toy dangling from his hand. Hank's calloused finger traced the toy's outline, then the nearly identical one in Coda's grasp. His voice cracked. "You thinkin' what I'm thinkin'?" Evelyn didn't answer. She was too busy reading the article's last line. Danny Whitaker was last seen wearing blue dinosaur pajamas. The infection crisis passed, but Coda's terror remained. He'd flatten his ears and bare his teeth at any approaching hand. His golden eyes wild with primal fear. Dr. Evelyn Carter had rehabilitated dozens of wild animals, but none fought care so viciously. "We can't force him to trust us," she told her staff, watching Coda shred the enrichment toys they offered. Then came the accident. A volunteer dropped a box of donated items near his enclosure. Coda's entire body stiffened when he saw what tumbled out. That same yellow fish toy, now slightly water-stained. The change was instantaneous. His growls softened to curious chirps. His rigid posture melted as he extended one tentative paw through the bars. Claws retracted, reaching not for freedom, but for the toy. Evelyn's breath caught. This wasn't just comfort. This was recognition. The new volunteer learned the hard way. Sarah thought she was helping when she took the fish to wash it. Coda's reaction wasn't mere anger. It was heartbreak. He launched himself at the cage door, biting Sarah's arm hard enough to draw blood, then collapsed into frantic pacing and mournful wails. Dr. Evelyn arrived to find Sarah in tears and Coda trembling violently. "It's not aggression," Evelyn realized aloud, watching Coda press his face against the bars toward the laundry room where Sarah had taken his toy. "Watch his eyes." The way Coda tracked Sarah's movements wasn't predatory. It was desperate. When the fish was returned, Coda gathered it into his mouth with shocking gentleness and retreated to a corner, licking it compulsively as if checking for damage. That's when Evelyn understood. This bobcat wasn't just wild. He was mourning. The crash woke everyone at 3:17 a.m. By the time staff reached the quarantine area, Coda was gone. But not quietly. Blood streaked the walls where he'd torn at the locks. Shards of safety glass glittered like ice across the floor. Security footage would later show the impossible. A half-starved bobcat cub hurling himself repeatedly at the enclosure's weakest point until it gave way. But he hadn't fled toward the woods. No, the trail of tiny paw prints led to the parking lot's flood debris pile. That's where Deputy Danny Reyes found him. Coda digging frantically through the wreckage, his muzzle bleeding from effort, the yellow fish clamped firmly in his teeth. When Danny approached, Coda dropped his treasure just long enough to snarl a warning. Then something extraordinary happened. The bobcat carefully picked up the toy again and pushed it toward a waterlogged backpack protruding from the mud. A child's Spider-Man backpack, its zipper rusted shut. Chaos erupted when a storage shelf collapsed in the treatment room. Medical supplies crashed to the floor as staff scrambled to secure frightened animals. In the confusion, no one noticed Coda slip from his temporary cage. Not until an intern's scream pierced the air. The young bobcat stood frozen in the supply closet doorway, his body rigid with recognition. Evelyn followed his gaze to a dusty box labeled Lost and Found, 2003. There, atop a pile of water-damaged items, lay another yellow fish toy, nearly identical but for one detail. A faded name tag reading Danny's Solaire. Coda approached slowly, nostrils flaring. He didn't pounce, didn't growl. With a tenderness that stunned the watching staff, he nosed the fish toward Evelyn's foot, then looked up at her with eyes too knowing for a wild animal. In that moment, the veterinarian, a woman who'd built her career on scientific fact, felt something icy trickle down her spine. This wasn't instinct. This was deliberate. The discovery came during routine cleaning. As volunteer Mark turned the original fish toy over to vacuum its fur, sunlight caught something unnatural beneath the stitching. Dr. Evelyn used surgical tools to carefully unpick the threads, revealing a hidden compartment no larger than a quarter. Inside rested two artifacts: a child's baby tooth and a folded scrap of notebook paper. The tooth might have been dismissed as childhood whimsy, but the paper bore a message in shaky block letters. If found, please return to Danny Whitaker at Shadow Creek. Evelyn's hands trembled as she checked the records. Danny Whitaker had disappeared 20 years ago to the day, during another catastrophic flood. She looked up to see Coda watching her intently through the glass, his yellow fish clutched in his jaws. The bobcat's golden eyes held an intelligence that went beyond animal cunning. In that moment, Evelyn understood two terrible truths. This toy wasn't random. And Coda, Evelyn's trembling fingers smoothed the brittle newspaper across her desk. The headline screamed, "Local Boy, 9, Missing in Flash Flood." The accompanying photo showed a gap-toothed child hugging the same yellow fish toy now resting in Coda's enclosure. Danny Whitaker had vanished on October 17, 2003, exactly 20 years before Coda was found. Evelyn's coffee went cold as she read the details. How Danny's Spider-Man backpack was recovered near Shadow Creek. How search teams scoured the valley for weeks. Her medical mind rebelled at the coincidence. But her heart noticed something else. In the photo, Danny wore blue dinosaur pajamas, the same color fabric found tangled in Coda's claws. The wall clock ticked loudly as Evelyn made a decision. She reached for her car keys. It was time to visit Danny's mother. The security footage revealed a pattern no one had noticed. Each night at precisely 2:13 a.m., Coda would perform the same strange ritual. He'd carry Solaire to the far corner of his enclosure, dig a shallow hole with his paws, and gently place the toy inside. Then he'd lie beside it, one protective foreleg draped over the buried treasure, until dawn's light prompted him to dig it up again. "It's a caching behavior," the junior vet insisted. "Wild cats bury food." But Evelyn knew better. She'd seen the way Coda licked the toy afterward, as if apologizing. The way his ears flattened when thunder rumbled in the distance. This wasn't instinct. This was reenactment. When Evelyn mentioned the behavior to Danny's elderly neighbor, the woman turned pale. Danny's mother. She always said she heard digging that night, right before the water came. The first frost came early that year, coating Cascade Wildlife's grounds in silver. At 3 a.m., the night guard nearly dropped his flashlight when Coda's enclosure erupted with sound. Not the usual yowls, but a deep, mournful howl that carried across the valley. What happened next would be debated for years. Some staff swore they heard an answering cry from Shadow Creek's direction. Others insisted it was just the wind. But Evelyn's notebook recorded the facts. Coda stood rigid at attention for exactly 47 seconds after his howl faded. Then he collected Solaire with unusual gentleness and retreated to his den, where he remained unusually still until morning. The security cameras captured one chilling detail. The moment before Coda howled, he'd been staring at something outside his enclosure, something the infrared lens showed wasn't there. Deputy Danny Reyes wasn't a superstitious man. But when Evelyn showed him Coda's fish toy and the newspaper clipping, something made him return to the flood debris pile. His metal detector wailed near a half-submerged oak stump. What he unearthed froze his blood. A child's Spider-Man lunchbox, its plastic faded but still intact. Inside rested a waterlogged notebook, its pages fused together except for one legible phrase. "Solaire protects me." Danny's hands shook as he radioed headquarters. This wasn't just evidence. This was proof the original search teams had been wrong. Danny Whitaker never left Shadow Creek Valley. As the deputy stood to leave, his flashlight caught movement in the trees, a pair of golden eyes watching from the darkness. When he turned for a better look, only Coda's distinctive paw prints remained in the mud, leading back toward the Wildlife Center. Lena Carter, Evelyn's estranged daughter and a psychology professor, arrived unannounced that weekend. She'd seen the news reports about the miracle bobcat and recognized her mother's handiwork. Their reunion was strained until Coda's evening ritual began. Lena observed in stunned silence as the bobcat performed his now familiar burial ceremony. "You're all missing the obvious," she whispered. "He's not just attached to that toy. He's recreating something." Lena pointed to Coda's precise movements, the way he nosed dirt over Solaire in 3 distinct sweeps, the exact angle he turned his head afterward. "That's not animal behavior. That's memory." Evelyn scoffed until Lena showed her the Whitaker case files. The last person to see Danny alive described him digging near the creek bank, burying something as the floodwaters rose. According to the witness, Danny had turned his head at precisely the same angle before screaming. Smoke tinged the air on the morning of October 16th. A brush fire, sparked by lightning, raced toward Cascade Wildlife. Staff worked frantically to evacuate animals, but Coda refused to budge from his enclosure. Even as embers rained down, he crouched over Solaire, growling at anyone who approached. Evelyn, her face streaked with soot, made the call, "Sedate him," but the dart only made Coda stagger, never releasing his grip on the toy. As flames licked the perimeter fence, Lena had an idea. She ran to the lost and found box and returned with Danny's second fish. The effect was instantaneous. Coda's ears pricked forward. He released his toy just long enough to sniff the offered duplicate, then gathered both carefully in his mouth and walked obediently into the transport crate. Through the smoke, Evelyn could have sworn she saw a small figure standing where Coda had been, but when she blinked, only flames remained. The fire transformed Cascade Wildlife into a charred skeleton. With no facilities to house him, Evelyn faced an impossible choice: keep Coda sedated in cramped temporary housing or release him prematurely. At dawn, she opened the recovery pen. Coda hesitated at the threshold, Solaire dangling from his jaws. Then something extraordinary happened. He turned and pressed the fish against Evelyn's knee before vanishing into the trees. Lena interpreted the gesture as gratitude, but Evelyn knew better. It was a promise. For 3 days, staff spotted Coda haunting the property's edge, always watching, never approaching. Then, on the 4th morning, they found something nailed to the blackened oak near his old enclosure. A child's wristwatch, its hands frozen at 2:17, the exact time Danny Whitaker had been reported missing. The first snow was falling when Coda reappeared. Evelyn heard the commotion outside her trailer. Staff shouting, cameras clicking. There stood Coda, nearly twice his original size but unmistakable. His golden eyes locked on hers. In his mouth wasn't Solaire, but a yellowed human femur, small enough to belong to a child. The bone showed distinctive fracture patterns consistent with flood trauma. Coda deposited his grim offering at Evelyn's feet, then turned and vanished back into the woods. Forensic testing would later confirm the awful truth. The bone matched the Whitaker family's DNA. But in that moment, as snowflakes settled on the ancient bone, Evelyn understood Coda's message. This wasn't a discovery. It was a delivery. Dr. Lin's call came at midnight. "Evelyn, you need to hear this." The carbon dating results made no sense. While the bone indeed belonged to Danny Whitaker, its condition suggested only 2 to 3 years of exposure, not 20. Like the body was preserved somehow, Lynn stammered. Evelyn hung up and stared at the second fish toy, Danny's original Solaire, now sitting on her desk. The answer came in a flash of understanding so terrible she nearly dropped her phone. There had been 2 disappearances. Danny in 2003, and another child, wearing similar pajamas, during last year's flash flood. A tragedy overshadowed by the larger disaster. A child whose parents, new to town, never connected their loss to the Whitaker legend. A child whose remains Coda had just brought home. The Blackwood Gazette archives revealed what no one wanted to admit. 5 children had vanished near Shadow Creek since 1950, all during floods, all between ages 8 to 10, all last seen wearing blue pajamas. The pattern was undeniable. As Evelyn pieced together the clippings, Coda watched from the woods outside her window, Solaire gleaming in moonlight. The final piece fell into place when she found the 1949 land deed. The creek had been diverted during construction, disturbing what locals once called the resting place of little spirits. Danny Whitaker wasn't an isolated tragedy. He was part of a cycle. And Coda wasn't just a bobcat. He was the latest in a long line of creatures who tried to break the curse, each bearing witness in their own way. That night, Evelyn took both fish toys down to Shadow Creek and let the current take them. When she turned back, Coda stood on the bank behind her, his golden eyes reflecting the moon. For the first time since his rescue, he looked at peace. The thermometer read 3:17 a.m. when the night guard's coffee went cold. Coda's howl wasn't the usual wildcat cry. It was a soul-piercing wail that raised hairs on necks throughout the compound. Security footage showed the bobcat standing rigid at his enclosure's edge, hackles raised, staring at something beyond the camera's range. For 47 seconds, an eternity in the silent facility, Coda held perfect stillness. Then came the response. 3 distinct knocks from the empty treatment room. When staff rushed to investigate, they found only one anomaly: Danny's second fish toy, placed neatly in the center of Evelyn's desk, though it had been locked in evidence storage. The motion-activated camera showed nothing but static during those crucial minutes. Morning light revealed the impossible. The bloodstains on Coda's original fish toy, marks Evelyn had documented meticulously during his medical treatment, were gone. Not faded, not cleaned, gone as if they'd never existed. Volunteer Mark dropped the toy in shock when he noticed something more disturbing. The cracked glass I now shown whole and new. It's like it's healing itself, he whispered to Evelyn. Their scientific minds scrambled for explanations until the radio crackled with Deputy Danny's voice reporting a new discovery. The flood debris pile where Coda had dug weeks earlier now showed no signs of disturbance. The child's backpack, the rusted watch, all evidence of their findings had disappeared, leaving only undisturbed mud. The past, it seemed, was rewriting itself. Deputy Reyes arrived at Cascade with shadows under his eyes and a manila folder clutched too tightly. The documents inside detailed Blackwood County's darkest open secret: 7 unsolved child disappearances since 1938, each during catastrophic floods, each victim last seen near Shadow Creek. My grandfather worked the first case, Danny admitted, showing Evelyn a faded photograph of a boy in, she shuddered, blue-striped pajamas. He swore until his dying day that something unnatural lived in that water. As if summoned by the words, Coda began pacing his enclosure, his usual fish-free restlessness replaced by eerie focus. He stared at Danny with unsettling intensity, then deliberately placed one paw over the deputy's shadow on the ground. A warning? A claim? The deputy swallowed hard. I think your cat knows more about this valley than any living soul. Martha Whitaker, Danny's 89-year-old grandmother, received them on her porch swing, her knotted hands stroking Coda's head as if she'd known him forever. The story she told turned their investigation on its head. Solaire wasn't just Danny's toy, she whispered. It came from my mother, who got it from a Blackfoot elder after the '38 flood. Said it was a vessel. Outside, thunder rumbled though the sky was clear. Martha described how the fish toy had appeared in their family for generations, always passing to a child in danger, always surviving disasters that should have destroyed it. It doesn't belong to the living, she said, pressing Danny's baby teeth, the same teeth Evelyn had found in the toy, into her grandson's palm. It belongs to Shadow Creek, and it always comes back. Coda, unusually still, watched the old woman with what could only be described as recognition. Lena's laptop glowed in the dark trailer as lines of data took shape. 7 disappearances, 7 major floods, all followed by one common thread: local reports of an unusually intelligent bobcat or cougar appearing near Shadow Creek. It's not a pattern, she breathed, turning the screen toward Evelyn. It's a cycle. The spreadsheet's final column made Evelyn's blood freeze. Each spirit cat had vanished exactly 1 year after its corresponding flood, always on the anniversary of the child's disappearance. Lena's finger trembled as she pointed to today's date, October 16th. 1 year since last year's flood. 1 year since Coda's rescue. Outside, a branch snapped. There stood Coda at the tree line, Solaire in his mouth, watching them with eyes that held centuries of sorrow. He turned and melted into the woods without a sound. The alarm blared at 2:13 a.m. Coda's enclosure stood empty, the gate swinging open though the lock remained intact. Evelyn and Lena followed his tracks by flashlight, the beam catching eerie reflections in the dew. Each paw print glistened faintly blue, as if dipped in bioluminescent algae. The trail led inexorably toward Shadow Creek, where the water ran strangely still despite the season. There, on the same sandbar where Danny's backpack had briefly reappeared, Coda sat waiting. Not running, not hiding, waiting. In his mouth gleamed both fish toys, the original Solaire and its twin, held with ceremonial care. As the women approached, the Bobcat didn't flee. He simply turned his golden gaze toward the black water and uttered a sound neither had heard before. A chirping trill, almost like a child's laughter echoing across decades. The first step was tentative, Coda's front paw breaking the creek's glassy surface. Then the second. Lena lunged forward, but Evelyn caught her arm. "No," the veterinarian breathed. "Look." Moonlight revealed what daylight might have concealed. The water wasn't swallowing Coda so much as welcoming him. Ripples spread outward in perfect concentric circles despite the lack of current. As the Bobcat waded deeper, his form seemed to blur, to stretch. For one heart-stopping moment, Evelyn swore she saw two shapes, a golden-furred body and a smaller human silhouette walking side by side. Then Lena's flashlight flickered. When it steadied, the creek stood empty but for two yellow fish toys floating calmly on the surface, their glass eyes catching the moonlight like a final wink. Dawn found them still there, staring at the now ordinary creek. Lena's voice broke the silence. "Mom, look." There, in the soft mud of the bank, three impressions stood out clear as photographs. A bobcat's paw print, a child's bare footprint, and between them, the perfect outline of a fish toy. As they watched, the rising sun warmed the creek, and the impressions faded like mist. The fish toys were gone too, though neither woman had seen them move. Evelyn's hand went to her pocket, where something crinkled, the note from Solaire's hidden compartment, which she could have sworn she'd left at the lab. Unfolding it revealed new words beneath Danny's original message, written in a shaky child's hand. "Thank you for letting us go home." The cry tore from Lena's throat before she could think. A sister's instinct decades too late. She plunged into Shadow Creek up to her knees, hands raking through water that felt suddenly, impossibly warm. Evelyn shouted after her, but Lena wasn't listening. Something had brushed her fingertips, something solid and small and understanding. When she opened her fists, the creek water streaming through her fingers carried not sediment, but hundreds of tiny blue threads, the same shade as Danny's pajamas, as the fabric in Coda's claws. On the bank behind her, Evelyn sank to her knees, not in grief, in awe, for rising with the morning mist were shapes, dozens of them, flickering between feline grace and childlike wonder before dissolving into sunlight. The last to fade was the smallest, his outline holding something round and yellow that might have been a toy or a sunbeam or both. They sat there until noon, clothes drying stiff with creek mud, trying to process what couldn't be processed. It was Lena who spotted it first. A flash of yellow in the reeds. Not Solaire, but something newer. A child's rubber duck, the kind sold at Blackwood's general store, its paint barely faded. Stuck to its underside was a scrap of paper so fresh the ink still smelled. 7 words. "The next flood is coming. Be ready." Evelyn turned it over. On the bottom, barely visible, someone had scratched a tiny paw print beside a child's smudged thumbprint. In the distance, thunder rumbled though the sky remained clear. Somewhere beyond Shadow Creek, a twig snapped. Something golden moved between the trees. And the cycle, the terrible, beautiful cycle, remained unbroken. Morning light revealed the golden eagle feather on Lena's sill. An impossibility since the species hadn't nested here in decades. His quill held faint teeth marks. Lena knew before testing bobcat saliva. The feather's underside bore one inked word. Soon. That afternoon, Martha Whitaker passed peacefully in her sleep, her hands clutching Danny's baby teeth and a faded photograph. The coroner noted her expression. Not grief, but joyous recognition. At the funeral, a shadow moved through distant trees. Not a bobcat, not a child. Something in between. Lena placed the feather on Martha's casket. By dusk, it had vanished. The cycle was turning. Cascade Wildlife staff found Coda's enclosure undisturbed, gate locked, bedding smooth. Only Solaire's absence confirmed his departure. Evelyn traced claw marks too precise for escape. Roman numerals near the latch. 23. The 23rd of October. 2 days away. That evening, Lena discovered muddy child-sized footprints circling her cabin, each overlapped by feline tracks. Her security camera showed only static during the incident, but captured clear audio. Whispered words in unison. A child's voice and animal growl, saying, "She's coming." When Lena checked Martha's old photo album, she found the truth. October 23rd, 1938 was the first disappearance. Exactly 85 years before tomorrow's date. The morning after Coda's disappearance, a hiker brought in an injured red fox kit. Its den had flooded mysteriously, no rain for weeks. The creature fought sedation until something remarkable happened. A volunteer dropped a yellow rubber duck, the one from the creek, into its cage. Instant calm. Evelyn examined the toy under magnification, finding what she dreaded. Fresh teeth marks overlapping Coda's old ones. The duck's belly now read 7, where "Be Ready" had been. 7. The exact number of past disappearances. Outside, the wind carried a sound like children laughing. The fox kit turned its head sharply, as if answering a call. At Shadow Creek's bank, Lena left 2 offerings. Danny's favorite candy bar and Coda's old collar. The water rippled without wind, drawing them beneath. When Lena turned, she found 7 stones arranged in a paw print shape, each engraved with a date. 1938, 1951, 1964, 1977, 1990, 2003, 2016. The pattern was undeniable every 13 years. The next stone space stood empty, awaiting 2029's engraving. A branch snapped behind her. Lena didn't turn. She knew better than to look directly at spirits mid-transition. But her peripheral vision caught golden fur blurring into a child's striped shirt before dissolving into mist. The town's historical society received an anonymous donation, a meticulously researched exhibit on Shadow Creek's guardian spirits. Visitors marvel at the centerpiece. A taxidermied bobcat beside a child's mannequin, both holding yellow fish replicas. Few notice the details. The bobcat's glass eyes follow viewers, and the child's pajamas change positions nightly. Staff blame pranksters, but old-timers whisper truths. They've seen paw prints materialize around the exhibit during storms, heard faint growls answering children's laughter. Some swear the display's counter ticks upward after each flood. 8 names now, though records show only 7 victims. The 8th space waits, collecting dust. For now, a wildlife camera captured the image at 2:17 a.m., an adult bobcat standing sentinel at Danny Whitaker's memorial plaque. Its golden eyes reflected light unnaturally. Zooming in revealed strangeness. The creature held something yellow in its mouth, and its shadow stretched wrong, forming a child's silhouette. The photo went viral before mysteriously corrupting. Only 1 copy remained, printed and mailed to Evelyn with a note. The cycle continues. Prepare the girl. It was signed with a paw print. That afternoon, Lena adopted a skittish foster child who'd survived last year's flash flood. The girl's favorite toy? A yellow rubber duck. Old Tom swears the creek saved him. His overturned boat should have been a death sentence during the sudden squall. But something golden and fast darted through churning water, herding him toward land. Not animal nor child, but both, he insists, showing the claw marks on his life vest. Too large for a bobcat, too small for a bear. At the hospital, nurses found yellow fluff in his pockets. No source, no explanation. When Evelyn visited, Tom grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "Tell Lena to check her attic," he rasped. The boy left her answers. He died smiling at something nobody else could see. The memoir's publication stirred controversy. Skeptics mocked its supernatural claims, but flood survivors wrote heartfelt thanks. especially those who'd encountered golden-eyed guardians during disasters. Lena kept one fan letter separate, postmarked from a non-existent zip code. The child's handwriting read, "Thank you for remembering us. Solaire says hello." Enclosed was a photo of a 1950s boy hugging a bobcat, both holding fish toys. The reverse read, "Not all cycles are curses. Some are second chances." That night, Lena's foster daughter sleepwalked to the creek, returning with wet pajamas and a whisper. "Coda says I'll be safe now." Retirement couldn't keep Evelyn from the sanctuary's midnight call. The cougar cub's condition mirrored Coda's, same injuries, same blue fabric in its claws. But this time, the yellow duck in its enclosure bore Lena's address. The cub's X-ray revealed an anomaly, a human finger bone lodged in its stomach, recently consumed. DNA matched no database. As dawn broke, Evelyn made her choice. She opened the cage, whispering, "Find her." The cub vanished into woods ringing with children's laughter. Back home, Evelyn found her answer. A 1943 newspaper hidden in her attic. The headline, "Local girl, 8, saves brother from flood using trained bobcat." Blackwood's children play a new game, whistling near Shadow Creek at dusk, hoping to see golden eyes blink back. Parents humor them until the day little Sarah Johnson wanders off during a storm, returning dry and unharmed, babbling about the nice kitty and the big brother. Her pockets overflow with blue threads and one perfect yellow feather. The search party finds only animal tracks leading to safety, except for one set of small bare footprints that vanish mid-stride. That night, Lena's foster daughter adds an 8th stone to her hidden collection. Its date? Today's. Its engraving? Not a name, but a promise. Protected. The yellow rubber duck sat innocently on Lena's porch swing. No note, no footprints. Just morning dew beating on its smooth surface. Lena turned it over, revealing fresh teeth marks overlapping Coda's old ones. Her foster daughter, Emma, reached with trembling fingers. "It's for me," she whispered. Before Lena could react, the creek behind them rippled against the current. 3 distinct splashes, like something had entered the water. That evening, Emma's nightlight caught the duck's glass eye glowing faintly blue. When Lena checked the security feed, the footage showed only static at 2:17 a.m., and Emma's empty bed filled with creek water that wasn't there. Martha's Bible study group gathered at the memorial plaque, their wrinkled hands tracing Danny's name. Not in grief, in gratitude, for they remembered 2003's flood, how something golden had herded their grandchildren to high ground, how the water stopped rising exactly at 2:17 a.m. Old Mrs. Peabody opened her purse, revealing a yellow fish keychain. "From a boy who wasn't there," she insisted. The women nodded knowingly. That night, security cameras at the senior center malfunctioned briefly. The playback showed 7 blurred figures, some feline, some childlike, dancing in the parking lot before dissolving into fireflies. The cleaning crew found only one clue: wet paw prints leading back to Shadow Creek. Emma's crayon drawings troubled her teacher. Page after page of a golden cat leading children through storms. Always 7 kids. Always blue pajamas. When questioned, Emma described the before time with unsettling detail. "Coda carries the little ones when the water comes too fast." The school counselor dismissed it as imagination, until pulling 1950s flood records. 7 missing children. Blue sleepwear noted in each case file. That afternoon, Emma brought show and tell. A mud-caked wristwatch with hands frozen at 2:17. "Danny says it's almost time," she announced. The classroom's aquarium lights flickered, casting fish-shaped shadows that swam counterclockwise for exactly 47 seconds before normalizing. Evelyn found the scrapbook in her attic, pages filled with articles about guardian animals throughout history. Each story featured a child's toy as the common thread. The final page held a recent photo of Emma and a bobcat-shaped shadow, its edges too sharp to be natural. Written beneath in unfamiliar handwriting, "The love we leave behind becomes the paw prints that guide others home." Outside, thunder rumbled despite clear skies. Evelyn's old radio crackled to life, playing a decades-old lullaby. Through the static, 2 voices harmonized. A child's and a cat's purr. When the song ended, The radio's display read 2:17 a.m., 4:03 paralyzing seconds before going dark. Lena discovered the pattern while researching. Every spirit animal legend shared one rule. The vessel, toy, must be freely given to the next guardian. That explained why Coda left Solaire for Emma. But the archives revealed something darker. When communities forgot these stories, disaster struck harder. The 2016 flood, which claimed 2 extra lives, occurred after the Historical Society removed their superstitions exhibit. That night, Lena placed Emma's duck in the town square fountain. By dawn, 7 children had found identical toys on their doorsteps. Security footage showed nothing unusual, just ripples moving against the fountain's current at 2:17 a.m., forming perfect paw prints that faded with the rising sun. The weather vane spun wildly as Emma sleepwalked to Shadow Creek. Lena followed, heart pounding, just in time to see her daughter wade into moonlit water and not sink. Something golden moved beneath the surface, keeping Emma afloat. Then came the voices, 7 distinct giggles. Emma reached down, emerging with 2 objects, a rusted Spider-Man lunchbox and Coda's old collar. The creek bed glowed momentarily, revealing 7 child-sized shadows holding hands with a large feline shape. When social workers later tested the lunchbox, they found something impossible. A fresh peanut butter sandwich inside. The bread still soft, the jelly sweet. Just like Danny's favorite. October 23, 2029 arrived with unnatural silence. At precisely 2:17 a.m., every dog in Blackwood howled simultaneously. Lena awoke to Emma's bed empty, the window open, but the child's footprints outside alternated between bare feet and paw prints. The trail led to Shadow Creek, where 7 yellow ducks floated in a perfect circle. Lena's flashlight caught movement. Emma standing waist-deep, petting something large and golden. Then the impossible. The water rose in a protective wall around them as floodwaters raged downstream. When dawn came, Emma sat dry on the bank, braiding blue threads into her hair. "Coda says we're safe now," she whispered. "The cycle's complete." The morning after the flood, the town awoke to miracles. Collapsed bridges had landed perfectly to form escape routes. Fallen trees created stair-step rescues, and every survivor told the same story. Golden eyes in the darkness, guiding them to safety. At the memorial plaque, 8 new names shimmered, not carved, but formed by living moss. The 8th read, Emma Carter Whitaker, 2029. When Lena protested, the ground warmed beneath her feet. A child's laugh echoed from empty air. That afternoon, Emma's teacher submitted her drawing to the Historical Society. A detailed sketch of 8 children and 1 large bobcat, all holding hands around Shadow Creek. The title? My Family. The wildlife camera captured it at last. A full-grown bobcat leading 8 children along Shadow Creek's bank. Not ghosts, but living, laughing kids in blue pajamas. Emma walked at the rear, carrying a yellow duck. As they reached the sandbar, the footage glitched. When it cleared, only Emma remained, waving at something unseen. The camera's timestamp read 2:17 a.m., though it was broad daylight. That week, 7 families received mysterious packages, each containing a child's lost belonging from past floods, perfectly preserved. The Whitakers got Danny's favorite cap, smelling faintly of peanut butter. Folded inside, a note in Emma's handwriting. They're playing now. No more storms. Years later, Blackwood's new Guardians of Shadow Creek exhibit tells the full story, with 1 empty display labeled, "For Future Protectors." Visitors often report hearing purrs near the memorial plaque, especially during storms. Emma, now a wildlife biologist, still leaves yellow ducks along the creek bank each October. Some disappear, some return with tiny teeth marks, and one, just one, came back with an addition. A child's fingerprint and a bobcat's whisker sealed in resin beneath its wing. The label reads Coda and Danny, 2003-infinity. On quiet nights, old-timers swear they see 9 shadows dancing in the mist. 8 children and something golden keeping watch from the trees.